So basically this session is about various questions that have been asked by various viewers, and the most pressing questions I've put them in a format where much of the major themes will be covered. So the first question that I'm going to ask Pervez Hoodbhoy, Dr. Saab, is regarding the Jinnah and partition video that you did. So the question is, why talk of past, meaning partition, as in the Jinnah program? Should we not be looking towards the future? India and Pakistan are realities. Let's figure out how to make India and Pakistan live together in peace. This is asked by Imtiaz Dar, but various other people have also asked this question, and I've rephrased it in my own words. So let's start. What's your...
Oh, there can't be any disagreement that India and Pakistan are realities, that we are neighbors, we will forever be neighbors, and that we have to live together in peace. But on the other hand, you cannot forget the past, because so many mistakes have been made that if we don't recognize what they were, if we don't recognize the forces that led to the creation of India and Pakistan, then we will be then groping in the dark. We will not know how to make peace with each other unless we know what it is that actually separated us, and what were the forces, and what were the people, and what were the economics behind it all. So all of those things have to be understood, and so therefore I think the session that I had with Dr. Ishtaq Ahmed was useful from that point of view. It tells us that there were many misconceptions about history, and okay, that's about Jinnah, people can go and watch that, but there are other things that we Pakistanis, and of course Indians on that side, have to understand well enough. For example, why is it that East Pakistan broke away from West Pakistan? To this day, we are not allowing an honest investigation into that question, nor are we asking what led to the various wars between India and Pakistan. We've just got propaganda, and so we have to get to the truth before we can ever get to peace. Well, I absolutely agree. It's the future that we must look to, but we have to learn from the past.
Exactly, and just to add to that, in many ways partition was a long drawn out event, right? It was one incident, but based on that there was a legacy of it, where people had various memories of it. And in many ways, the identities of Pakistan and India were formed through that process of violent partition. And when we don't recognize this fact, we read history backwards, that India and Pakistan, or just to abstract it from that, Hindus and Muslims cannot or could not live together. But for centuries they did. And certain events, and precisely British colonialism was precisely to blame for it. The manner in which they codified religion, the manner in which they communalized identities, and that aspect has to be understood. And various authors, for instance, Wazira Zamindar has written a book about it, that partition was not a one-time event. It was a long, drawn-out process which involved various transfers of population, which also involved the fact that various refugees, for instance, Muhajir refugees in Pakistan were involved with expelling Hindus from Karachi, for instance. And that process was there in Delhi, for instance, as well, but also in Lahore and so on and so forth. But the point is, when you recognize that partition, that violence, and the manner in which it had a legacy on various people and their memory, and also the fact that it influenced the manner in which different states, both India and Pakistan, dealt with each other. But now I think the generations that were immediately close to partition do not have that violent memory, and newer generations can have that potential of moving forward.
Oh, I would absolutely agree, and of course it's a process. So in fact, there's a book that I'm writing which is nearly written. I hope it'll get published in the coming year. It's on Pakistan, its origins, identity, and future. I'm not going to tell much more about that because we have to get on to the other questions.
I'd love to read that book. So let's get on to the next question. Now again, various people have asked it, but I've distilled one from Mirza Taimur Beg. The question is, why do Punjabis not speak Punjabi with their children?
I suppose you're talking about Punjabis in Pakistan, because the Punjabis in the Indian part of Kashmir, they certainly speak Punjabi to their children. They have Punjabi newspapers. They have a script, the Gurmukhi script. There are Punjabi television channels, and it's a completely different ball game over there. Now, what I've learned from my Punjabi friends is that prior to partition, and so their parents, their grandparents, and earlier, they used to speak to each other in Punjabi, of course, and also to their children. And that was true between Muslims and Hindus prior to partition. But after partition, it's changed. There is no Punjabi newspaper in Pakistan, in Punjab. Parents speak to their children in Urdu, not in Punjabi. And of course, sometimes that Urdu isn't very good. But why do they do it? They say, ye gawar zaban hai. Punjabi is not a good, it's good for coarse language, but kitchen language or to speak with servants, but not with your children. This is not for the shurafa. So in a sense, they're trying to emulate the Lucknow types, but they don't succeed in that. Why they do it is because I think it's rooted in the idea that Punjab is the heartland of Pakistan. Pakistan was made for Islam. Urdu is the language of Islam, and so they've got into that. However, it's not working very well, I'll tell you that. There are Punjabi nationalists who are very ardent. And in fact, even when people get into arguments with each other, they'll argue first in Urdu, then they'll burst out in Punjabi, here in Islamabad, here in Lahore. With Sindhis, it's not been this way. They've been possessed with their nationalism. And so parents will speak to their children in Sindhi, not in Urdu. Of course, my parents were a little different. They were hoping, thinking that our children have to go further than just and so instead of Sindhi, they taught us Urdu. But that was an exception. Most Sindhis will teach their children, or speak to their children in Sindhi. And there's Sindhi newspapers, their books. Is not true for Punjab. And the reason is because basically Punjab considers itself the heartland of Pakistan.
And in many ways, this has led to such a decline as far as literary production and literary standards are concerned in Punjab. And I think it's a huge loss as far as culture and legacy and tradition are concerned, because many generations now are just not connected to their roots, with their tradition, both inside Pakistani Punjab and as well as Punjab across the border. But as sad as it is, but I think we should move on to the next question, which is, again, many people ask this. So the question by Raheel Siddiqui is, you should stick to science, not talk about politics, religion, and society. So a very provocative question. What do you have to say to that?
Oh, I love science. I would most happily stick to it. And in fact, look, I've written research papers, I've written a book. I've also done hundreds of lectures, online lectures. They're available at the Iqbal Ahmed Center for Public Education website. You can just Google and find them. They're regular courses, full courses for the virtual university, etc. But why should I not speak on politics? I have a right just like everybody has a right. The telewala has a right to speak on it. If on our television you can have generals and majors and colonels who have absolutely no depth of reading, they probably even haven't read 20 books in their whole lives. Well, why shouldn't I, when I read a book every 2, 3, 4 days? So, I think I have a right to think about the world, to respond to my environment, to what is around me, and I do so whenever somebody asks me a question, or if a TV channel invites me. If they say, what is your opinion on such and such thing, then I can have an opinion just like anybody can have an opinion. So there's no problem with that. I just wish that we had more representation of different thoughts on television.
Exactly, and just to add to that, in many ways, politics, everyone is related to politics. Everyone is involved in politics. Politics is precisely a game for everyone, and everyone has an input as far as that is concerned. And the idea that only gatekeepers, certain mediators can comment on political matters is very elitist and very alienating as well. Just as an example, so for instance, on TV, if only a certain PhD in political science can talk about politics, their way of talking about politics will be very alienating for most people. And politics is something, especially in a democracy, and we live in a democracy, it's imperfect, yeah, it's a hybrid regime, sure, but still it's a democracy where every vote counts and every vote is equally valid.
Well, yeah, that's what you say is absolutely correct. On the other hand, although I feel confident about remarking on what has happened yesterday or 3 days ago, or my opinion on such and such political action, I would not dare to give a lecture or to give an opinion on the efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines, for example, because that involves real depth. It requires you to know biotechnology. Should I say that mRNA is better because it goes and it twists the genes in this particular way? No, I don't know, because I haven't studied that subject in sufficient depth. I could if I am willing to invest that time, but those are specialized things. Politics is not specialized. Politics is for everybody. It should be for everybody.
Similarly, in the society that we live in, various influences form who we are, how we operate. And one of that is religion. And the idea that only ulema can speak about religion is also, I think, a bit unfair, because this was the project of Muslim modernists, right? That everyone can get in touch with religion, everyone can understand religion and form their own relationship with that. So this gatekeeping as far as religion is concerned is also, I think, very alienating, and as well as the fact that it has certain power dynamics attached to it as well.
Absolutely correct. Look, Islam is different from Catholicism in that way. The Catholics have a pope. They have a papal hierarchy. There are the archbishops, then there are the bishops, and then there's a whole slew of people under them, cardinals and so forth. Islam doesn't have that. It's democratic. You can interpret Islam the way you want, and so can he or he. That's all right. And that, I think, is something that upsets the ulama, the clergy. They say, unless you can have that amount of scholarship, you have no right to speak on that. Well, okay, they have all that scholarship, so why are they fighting with each other? Why do they never manage to agree? 1400 years have passed. There are still the 4 Sunni schools, and they're the Shia, and they can't even talk to each other.
I think that's very well put. And just to add to that, in many ways, that's also the beauty of Islam, right? That there are different interpretations, and those interpretations evolve with time. And I think that's something which marks it as a difference and also gives it enough space for reformation, for evolution. And let's go on to the next question, which again, very provocative. Why do you amplify or highlight only negative things about Pakistan? And just to attach to that is a question that why do you say good things about India? So this question is asked by Mike prior.
Oh, I say very good things about Pakistan. When I see the good things, when I see Abdul Sattar Idhi doing all that wonderful work, he's gone now, it was spontaneous that I praised him wherever I could. When I see students who are exceptionally bright or who have survived the odds and who have a brilliant career ahead of them, I say, great. I'm very happy about that. When I see Pakistanis cooperating together, as they did in the 2005 earthquake, you had people from all over the country, from Karachi, from Quetta, from Lahore, Islamabad. Everybody went to those areas. I was so thrilled. I had never seen such a thing before in my earlier years over here. So I made a very big deal out of that whenever I got the chance. So whenever there's something good, I say it. On the other hand, isn't it true that there is a lot that is going wrong in this country? Look at the terrible class divisions in this country. The poor have no voice. They are now in a desperate situation, scrounging for food. All I have to do is just go outside, step outside my gate, and I see these young children who are rummaging through piles of rubbish. That is not what should be in a civilized country. There is no true democracy here, a democratic political system. Maybe there will be someday, but it isn't there now. So it is important for every one of us to speak up and do whatever we can to change things. That means you have to criticize. As far as India, I like some things about that. I love the excellence it has achieved in science. I very much like the fact that they are able to send spacecraft to Mars, Mangalyaan, and so forth. I do not like Narendra Modi. I think he's a fascist. I think that what is happening to the farmers in India now is terrible. This is something India has to be criticized for. And so why should I not? I am.
Similarly, dissent and critique are very high forms of patriotism. And in many ways, one can love their country and society while at the same time highlighting the things that are bad about it. And those things go together. And I don't understand why people go on like, oh, you should only talk about positive things, because that's propaganda, that's not analysis.
You're very right on that. You see, the concept of patriotism that exists in Pakistan and many countries is that you're patriotic if you hate somebody. So the patriotic Pakistani is one who says, go kill the Indians, go defeat the Indians. They don't pay their taxes. They don't obey the laws of this country. They go through the traffic lights without stopping. And yet they call themselves patriotic Pakistanis. So they hide their contempt for the people of Pakistan by waving the flag and saying, we are the ones who will fight India. That's nonsense. That's completely wrong.
And when that happens in India, obviously we oppose that as well, because Hindutva regime, as you said, it's a fascist regime and it's destroying the fabric, the social fabric, the Nehruvian ideals that India was built on. And it's sad, it's frightening, and this is where we can only critique as far as that is concerned.
So the patriotic Indian is one who loves his people or her people, and who says that patriotism means that we work for a better India, not fight Pakistan. So it's the same situation on both sides of the border.
Very well put. So now we'll move beyond social and political questions. So the next question I'm going to ask is by Usama Leo. The question is related to the video on evolution. The question is, you scientists cannot answer why things came out of nothing.
Oh, true. Absolutely. Science doesn't tell you why we are here. It tells you how we are here. So what scientists do is they deduce the laws of matter by looking at atoms, molecules, how they combine together, how they make complex biological molecules, how it all started from the Big Bang. You have the Big Bang, then you have this formation of stars, galaxies, the spread of the universe, the eventual creation of, eventually stars burn out, the supernova, they explode, and of course our solar system is a result of that, etc., etc. But it all starts from the Big Bang. And if you ask a scientist, why did the Big Bang happen? He'll say, come on, this is not a question for me. Go ask this of somebody else. Look, we don't know the answer. Science is about how we got here. And this is the question of why do we exist, or why are we here on earth? That's not a question that science is ever going to answer.
Similarly, the next question Azhar Noshahi asks is related to the video that you did on jinns. He asks that why is it that you are not engaging with it? Why are you denying their existence? However, I'm doubtful if you actually did that in the video. So can you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, so actually I read the question and said that it's in the Quran that jinns exist, and there's a surah on that. Look, I don't know Arabic in sufficient detail. I can make out, but I don't know how serious that verse is about the literal existence of jinns. There are people who are true alims, and here I'll point to Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, who actually did a commentary on the Quran. It's a Tafsirul Quran, and he said that these jinns are actually metaphorical, imaginary creatures that have been invented for achieving a particular purpose. They have to be understood figuratively, not literally. Okay, well look, the ulama can go and figure it out for themselves. All I'm saying is that if there was a means of engaging with jinns through our equipment, which did not involve belief but actual objective measurement, observation, then fine, I'm happy to deal with jinns. But it turns out that anytime you try and see a jinn, it doesn't work. So I'm not saying that jinns don't exist. Maybe they do. It's like the tooth fairy. I've never seen a tooth fairy, but I can't deny the existence of a tooth fairy.
Precisely, it's not a scientific question. So the next question, again, many people have asked this. Why do you not engage with social media websites? So for instance, Twitter, Facebook, why do you not communicate with your fans, following, and why do you not spread your message or ideas or critique through those mediums?
I would very much like to if I had enough time. But how am I to do physics? How am I to read books? How am I to write? If I was to spend my time doing all this on social media, well, then I wouldn't have time for all of those other things. And the other thing is that, I don't think I'm not sure, but I don't think that this little creature will allow me. Can you imagine if I had a smartphone, I wouldn't be able to do anything in my life. It's such a absorber of time. I can't afford it.
It is, but I think that's for another time. So finally, I'll move on to the last question. 2020 was a very different year for most of us because of COVID-19 and the economic crisis that it led to. So what are some of your hopes and dreams for 2021? What are you looking forward to? What are you hoping for?
Well, first of all, that the vaccine arrives, that it's effective, and that we get out of all this very fast. Then I'm looking for Biden to be a much more reasonable person. America has become an absolute nuisance to the world. Let's hope that with his being there, it will become less of a nuisance, that we move towards global peace, or at least away from war, because relations between the United States and China had gotten very, very bad. So I'm looking for something to happen over there. I'm hoping that the threat of war on Iran will be reduced or will go away, that the JCPOA will be now reaffirmed. So it was the cancellation of the nuclear deal that led to all this tension. I am hoping that in Pakistan we will move a step towards democracy, that the oppression of the people here in Balochistan and with the Pashtuns will be reduced, that they will get a voice in the running of this country, and that their most urgent demands will be met.
And with that, we'll end this question and answer video. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully, we'll see you next time.